The drill sergeant's voice cut through the station's recycled air like a plasma cutter through hull plating. Pain tolerance assessment begins in 30 seconds. Across the training deck, Kyvex flicked his secondary eyelids and sneered at the human standing 3 meters away. She was small, barely past his shoulder even with the added bulk of her compression suit, and her dark hair was pulled into a functional knot that left her face exposed. Vulnerable. He'd watched her stumble through zero-G maneuvers yesterday, heard her labored breathing during endurance drills. Now she met his gaze without flinching, and something in her stillness made his dorsal ridge bristle. "Your kind breaks easy," he said loud enough for the other cadets to hear. She tilted her head and her lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. The Galactic Defense Initiative's training facility orbited a red dwarf 40 light-years from Earth, and Lieutenant Commander Sora Miyazaki had spent 3 weeks proving she belonged there. The station's artificial gravity generators hummed beneath her boots as she stretched her wrists, rolling her shoulders back while Kyvex postured for the crowd. He was Vrexian, a species known for dense musculature and pain receptors clustered so tightly in their extremities that even minor injuries triggered overwhelming feedback. They wore it like armor, their capacity for suffering elevated to cultural mythology. "Assessment pairs have been randomized," the drill sergeant announced, her 3-fingered hand hovering over the console. Kyvex of Vrexia Prime and Sora Miyazaki of Earth stepped forward. Sora moved to the center mat, boots silent on the rubberized surface. Around them, 23 other cadets formed a loose circle, Thalorians with their crystalline skin, a pair of Quiller twins whose bioluminescence flickered with curiosity, and a stocky Terran man named Marcus who'd bunked next to her since orientation. He caught her eye and mouthed, "Careful." She nodded once. Kyvex cracked his knuckles, each joint producing a wet pop that echoed in the observation bay. "This will be over quickly," he said, his translator rendering his native clicks into flat standard. "Humans feel pain 3 times more acutely than Vrexians. Your nervous system is a design flaw." "Funny," Sora said, keeping her voice level. "I was thinking the same about yours." The sergeant activated the assessment protocol. On the wall display, 2 body diagrams appeared, one human, one Vrexian, with pressure points highlighted in pulsing red. The rules were simple: controlled strikes to designated zones, biometric monitoring to measure pain response and recovery time. First to tap out or exceed safety thresholds lost points toward their combat certification. It was meant to teach control, not domination, but Kyvex's stance suggested he'd missed that memo. "Begin." He moved first, a calculated jab toward her shoulder nerve cluster. Sora slipped left, letting his knuckles graze her suit. The sensors registered minimal contact. She countered with a palm strike to his lower rib, a zone marked on his diagram, and his body jerked backward. His ridge flared indigo. "Lucky," he hissed, circling. "But you'll tire, humans always do." She didn't waste breath on a reply. His next strike came faster, aimed at her thigh. She pivoted, took the hit, and felt the deep ache bloom through muscle. The biometric readout on her wrist flashed yellow, moderate pain registered. She breathed through it, counted to 3, and watched the color fade to green. Recovery time, 4.2 seconds. Kyvex's eyes narrowed. Impressive pain tolerance for a mammal. "But you're still fragile." He lunged, going for her collarbone with more force than the protocol allowed. Sora caught his wrist mid-strike, redirected the momentum, and swept his legs. He hit the mat hard, and the impact sensor blinked orange. Around them, the crowd murmured. A Thalorian cadet whispered something that sounded like approval. Kyvex rolled to his feet, ridge now dark purple. "You think you've proven something?" His voice climbed an octave. "Your bones are hollow tubes filled with marrow. One real hit and you'll shatter." "Then hit me for real," Sora said. She stood in neutral stance, arms loose at her sides. "Stop holding back." His face twisted. "Protocol forgotten," he charged. His fist connected with her ribs, a blow meant to crack, not test. Pain exploded white-hot across her torso, and the biometric sensor screamed red. The sergeant barked a warning, but Sora didn't tap out. She absorbed it, let the agony settle into her bones, and when Kyvex stepped back to admire his work, she smiled. "Your turn," she said. She struck his elbow joint with surgical precision. The Vrexian pain response was instant. His entire arm lit up like a circuit board, nerves firing in cascading waves. He screamed, a sound that made half the cadets flinch. His biometric display spiked crimson and held. Recovery time, 19 seconds. When he could speak again, his voice shook. You can't. You're right about one thing, Sora said, stepping closer. Human pain receptors are sensitive, but they're also adaptable. We recover faster. We learn to tolerate more. She tapped his chest plate right over his primary nerve cluster. Your species never needed to. Every injury teaches you to fear the next one. Kyvex swung wildly. She ducked, caught his arm, and applied pressure to the nerve bundle near his wrist. He buckled, knees slamming into the mat. His ridge had gone pale, almost translucent. Sora held him there, counting silently, watching his readout flash between red and orange. At 15 seconds, she released him. He collapsed forward, gasping. Around them, the training deck had gone silent except for the hum of life support and the quiet beep of biometric monitors. Sora straightened, rolled her shoulders, and met the sergeant's unreadable expression. Assessment paused, the sergeant said. Medical team to the mat. But Kyvex was already struggling upright, pride warring with pain across his features. This isn't over, he said, though his voice lacked conviction. Sora looked at him, really looked, and saw what lay beneath the bravado. Fear wrapped in cultural expectation. A lifetime of being told his pain threshold made him superior, now crumbling under direct evidence to the contrary. She could press the advantage, humiliate him further. Instead, she extended her hand. You're right, she said. It's not over. We're training partners now, so let's figure out how we both survive this. He stared at her hand like it might contain a concealed weapon. 2 hours later, Sora sat in the station's medical bay with an ice pack pressed to her ribs. The diagnostic scanner had confirmed what she already knew: severe bruising, no fractures. The Vrexian medic, a female named Tikara with softer ridge coloration than Kyvex, worked in efficient silence, occasionally glancing at Sora with something that might have been respect. Your recovery metrics are unusual, Tikara said, updating the chart. Adrenaline response elevated but controlled. Endorphin production sustained across 14 minutes. She paused. Most humans would have tapped out at the first full contact strike. Most humans don't grow up on Titan Station, Sora replied. The words came out more tired than she'd intended. She adjusted the ice pack, felt the dull throb pulse in time with her heartbeat. Low gravity, high radiation shielding failures, weekly decompression drills. You learn to function through discomfort or you don't function at all. Tikara made a notation that looked like approval. Kyvex is in the next bay. His neural inflammation will take 6 hours to subside fully. Twice as long as standard for Vrexians. She met Sora's eyes. He's requesting transfer to a different training cohort. Will they grant it? Unlikely. The sergeant believes you demonstrated restraint given the provocation. Tikara sealed the medical file, but transfers have happened before. Usually when cultural friction escalates to violence. Sora thought about Kyvex's pale ridge, the way his body had folded when she'd applied even moderate pressure. He wasn't trying to hurt me, she said slowly. Not really. He was trying to prove something to himself. And did he succeed? No. Sora stood, testing her weight. The bruising pulled but held. Neither of us did. She found Marcus in the mess hall, hunched over a tray of synthesized protein and something that approximated rice. He looked up when she approached, relief plain on his broad face. Heard you put on a show. Also heard you might have ended that Vrexian's whole career. Exaggeration, Sora said, sliding onto the bench across from him. And it wasn't a show, it was a miscalculation on both sides. He called you fragile in front of the entire cohort. He's been told his entire life that pain tolerance equals worth. Sora picked at the edge of Marcus's tray, stealing a piece of synthetic mango. Then he meets a species that experiences pain more intensely but keeps functioning anyway, and his whole worldview cracks. Marcus studied her. You're defending him? I'm understanding him. There's a difference. She leaned back, felt the bench's cold metal through her shirt. Tomorrow we have joint tactical exercises. If he transfers out, I lose a training partner. If he stays and resents me, I gain an enemy. Neither helps me pass certification. So what's the play? Sora considered. Outside the viewport, stars wheeled past in slow rotation. Somewhere among them was Earth, and farther still, Titan Station, where she'd learned to breathe thin air and smile through migraines. I talked to him, she said finally. Before pride turns into something worse. Marcus raised an eyebrow. And say what? Sorry, I publicly dismantled your species' superiority complex. Something like that, but with fewer words and more coffee. She found Kyvex in the observation deck at 200 hours when the station's artificial night cycle dimmed the corridors to near darkness. He stood at the viewport, ridge still pale but no longer translucent, one hand pressed against the reinforced glass. Sora approached slowly, boots barely whispering against the deck. "Coffee," she offered, holding out the second cup she'd requisitioned from the mess. He glanced at her, then at the cup. "Vrexians don't metabolize caffeine effectively. It's decaf, mostly." She set it on the narrow console beside him. "And it's warm. Station's always cold this shift." For a long moment he said nothing. Then, "You could have broken my arm. The medic said you stopped 2 pounds of pressure short. Breaking your arm would have gotten me disciplined and set my certification back 3 weeks." Sora joined him at the viewport, careful to leave space between them. "Also, I didn't want to." "Why not?" His voice carried genuine confusion. "I struck you outside protocol parameters. I insulted your species. By any measure, I deserved. Deserving has nothing to do with it." She watched a supply shuttle drift past, running lights blinking green. "You were scared. Fear makes people lash out. I know because I've done it too." Kivex's ridge rippled, a micro-expression she couldn't read. "Vrexians do not experience fear in combat situations. We are bred for. Everyone experiences fear, you just call it something else. Tactical alertness, strategic caution, appropriate threat response." She turned to face him. "But it's still fear, and it still makes us do stupid things when we feel cornered." He picked up the coffee cup, stared into its dark surface. On Vrexia Prime, pain endurance is tested at adolescence. Those who can withstand bone-deep stimulation for 30 minutes without unconsciousness are honored. Those who cannot. He trailed off. "I lasted 42 minutes. My family celebrated for a week. And then I came here, and a human half my size demonstrated better pain management with 17 seconds of applied pressure." "Different nervous systems," Sora said gently. "You're comparing a bullet wound to frostbite. They both hurt like hell, but the mechanisms aren't compatible." "Then why does it feel like failure?" "Because you're 23 and 2,000 light-years from home, and everything you were taught to believe about yourself just stopped making sense." She took a sip of her own coffee, felt its warmth spread through her chest. "I felt the same way my first week on Titan Station. 14 years old, barely passed the medical screening, and every single colonist treated me like breakable cargo. Took me 6 months to prove I wasn't." Kivex finally looked at her directly. "How?" "By doing exactly what I did today, by not breaking when they expected me to, by showing up every shift even when my lungs burned and my vision blurred." She smiled, and this time there was no edge to it. "And by accepting help when I needed it." "Which I did, a lot." He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "The sergeant denied my transfer request. I heard. I cannot train with you effectively if I am," he struggled for the word, "compromised by shame." "Then we reset," Sora said. "Tomorrow, 600 hours, auxiliary gym. No sensors, no audience, no protocol, just sparring drills until we both understand each other's limits. Not as enemies, as partners who need to pass certification because washing out isn't an option." Kivex's ridge shifted toward amber, curiosity, maybe, or cautious hope. "You would trust me after today?" "Trust is earned in repetitions, not grand gestures, so we'll do the reps." She finished her coffee, set the cup down. "And if you try to sucker punch me again, I'll put you on the mat so fast you'll think the gravity generator malfunctioned." "Deal." For the first time since she'd met him, Kivex's expression softened into something almost like a smile. The auxiliary gym smelled like recycled sweat and disinfectant. Sora arrived early, running through stretches while the station's wake-up cycle gradually brightened the overhead panels. Kivex appeared at 5:58, his compression suit freshly calibrated, rigid neutral gray. They didn't speak at first, just moved through warm-ups in parallel, testing their body's readiness. "Start with basics," Sora said, stepping onto the mat. "Strikes and blocks, quarter speed, we're mapping each other's responses, not competing." They drilled for 90 minutes. Sora learned that Vrexians telegraphed with their ridge coloration before committing to attacks, that Kivex favored his left side because an adolescent injury had left microscopic nerves scarring along his right shoulder. He learned that humans compensated for lower muscle density with leverage and joint manipulation, that Sora's breathing pattern changed 3 seconds before fatigue would compromise her form. By 7:30, they'd moved to grappling. Kivex caught her in a hold that should have forced a tap out, but Sora twisted, found the pressure point behind his knee, and reversed their positions. He yielded immediately. "Again," he said, resetting. They cycled through 12 variations. Each time he adapted faster, learned to guard his vulnerable zones. Each time, Sora had to work harder for the reversal. Sweat soaked through her shirt and the bruising in her ribs screamed with every twist, but she pushed through. This was the work, not the flashy demonstration in front of the cohort, but the unglamorous repetition that built mutual understanding. At 8:20, Kyvex called a break. They sat against the wall, passing a water bottle back and forth. His ridge had gone deep blue contentment, Sora had learned. "You were right about the repetitions," he said. "I am beginning to anticipate your movements, not perfectly but enough to adjust." Same. Sora rolled her shoulders, felt the tension release. "You're faster than you look, and your recovery time between exchanges is improving, because I'm learning to expect the pain rather than fear it." He studied his hands, flexing his fingers. On Vrexia Prime, we are taught that pain is a test to be endured, not a signal to be interpreted. But humans treat it as data. You assess, adapt, continue. He searched for the word, efficient, it's survival. Sora took a long drink, felt the cold water settle in her stomach. When you grow up in environments that are constantly trying to kill you, you learn to distinguish between "this hurts but I can function" and "this hurts and I need immediate help." That calculation happens in milliseconds. It has to. Kyvex was quiet. Then, "I grew up in a city of 12 million, climate-controlled, with medical facilities on every third block. The most dangerous thing I encountered before military academy was a badly calibrated training simulator." His ridge flickered toward gray-blue embarrassment mixed with honesty. "I had no context for real pain until the academy entrance trials, and even then it was controlled, monitored, reversible. So you learned pain as performance," Sora said. "Something to display and be proud of, not something to navigate." Yes, he met her eyes, "And when you challenged that framework yesterday, I reacted as if you'd attacked my identity, because in a sense you had. I wasn't trying to, I know." He raised a hand, cutting her off gently. "But intention and impact are not always aligned. You demonstrated a truth I wasn't ready to accept, that pain tolerance is contextual, cultural, individual, that my species' approach is not inherently superior, merely different." His ridge deepened to indigo, a color Sora now recognized as contemplation. "It's humbling and necessary." They trained for another hour, then hit the showers before the 1,000 hours tactical briefing. In the corridor outside the conference room, Marcus intercepted them with raised eyebrows. "You two look disgustingly functional," he said, glancing between them. "Should I be worried or impressed?" "Impressed," Sora said. "Kyvex just taught me a nerve strike that'll drop a Thalorian in 3 seconds. And Sora demonstrated why human flexibility is a tactical advantage in close quarters," Kyvex added. His ridge was amber now, warmth, maybe even humor. "We are effective together." Marcus shook his head, grinning. 3 weeks ago you called her species fragile. 3 weeks ago I was an idiot operating on incomplete data," Kyvex replied without hesitation. "Humans are many things, fragile is not among them." The tactical briefing focused on multi-species coordinated operations. The sergeant paired them deliberately, Sora with Kyvex, Marcus with a quiller named Vess, 2 Thalorians with a methane breather from Kepler 442b. The scenario involved extracting a diplomatic team from a hostile station with limited oxygen and failing artificial gravity. They had 4 hours to plan and 6 hours to execute in the simulation bay. Sora and Kyvex worked the problem together, their earlier training translating seamlessly into strategic collaboration. He flagged structural weak points based on Vrexian engineering standards. She mapped human-accessible routes through ventilation systems too narrow for most species. When the simulation began, they moved like they'd been partners for months, covering each other's vulnerabilities, communicating in hand signals and microexpressions, adapting to complications without breaking stride. The extraction succeeded with 11 minutes to spare and 0 simulated casualties. The sergeant's evaluation was terse, adequate, repeat with enhanced hostility parameters tomorrow. But afterward, in the observation bay while the other teams cycled through, Kyvex turned to Sora with something like wonder in his expression. "We didn't just succeed," he said quietly. "We excelled. Our performance metrics were in the 93rd percentile. Because we know each other's limits now," Sora replied. "We trust each other to hold the line." Kyvex's ridge cycled through amber to deep blue. "I did not think that was possible after yesterday." "Neither did I," she smiled. But that's the thing about starting from a place of honesty. There's nowhere to go but up. That night, she found a message waiting in her bunk's data terminal. It was short, written in careful standard. "Thank you for the reset. I won't waste it." Sora leaned back against the thin mattress, felt exhaustion settle into her bones alongside something warmer. Outside the viewport, stars turned in their ancient dance, indifferent to the small dramas of cadets learning to trust each other. But inside this station, orbiting a dying red sun, two people from opposite sides of the galaxy had figured out how to stand side by side. She sent a reply, "Same time tomorrow. Bring your best." The third week of tactical training introduced live-fire exercises with non-lethal ammunition and stress-inducing environmental variables. Sora and Kaivex drew a scenario that involved breaching a defended position in zero gravity with limited oxygen reserves and hostile contacts using sonic disruptors. The Quiller twins had washed out of a similar exercise the day before, and Marcus's team had barely scraped a passing score. "Key vulnerabilities," Kaivex said, pulling up the simulation parameters on his data pad. They sat in the prep room 40 minutes before go time. "Sonic disruptors will disorient human vestibular systems more severely than Vrexian auditory processing. You'll need countermeasures." Sora nodded, already cycling through her suit's defensive protocols. "And zero-G with limited oxygen means your muscle density works against you. Higher oxygen consumption rate, faster fatigue, will need to stagger exertion." They built the plan in layers, accounting for each other's biological realities without euphemism or ego. When the simulation began, it immediately went wrong. The hostile contacts had been upgraded to adaptive AI that learned from previous teams' approaches. The first sonic pulse hit Sora 30 seconds in, and her vision whited out, balance system shrieking. She tumbled, reached for a handhold, missed. Kaivex caught her, magnetized boots anchoring them both, breathed through it. "Count backward from 10. His voice cut through the disorientation, steady and close. She counted, felt her inner ear recalibrate. By 7, she could see again. By 4, she was functional. "Go," she said, and they moved. The next 45 minutes were controlled chaos. Sora used her smaller profile to navigate narrow access tubes while Kaivex provided covering fire from elevated positions. When his oxygen reserves hit critical, she swapped her backup tank without discussion. When another sonic pulse caught her, he dragged her into a shielded alcove and stood guard while she recovered. The AI adapted, but so did they, faster, more fluidly, until the boundary between individual capability and partnered strength blurred entirely. They secured the objective with 3 minutes of oxygen remaining and only minor simulated injuries. In the debriefing, the sergeant actually smiled. Exemplary adaptation under compounding stress. "Your NeuralSync score suggests you're approaching non-verbal communication efficiency typically seen in bonded military units." She paused. "That's after 8 weeks minimum for most pairs. You've achieved it in 18 days. Kaivex glanced at Sora. His ridge was gold pride, but the communal kind. "We had motivation," he said simply. "Clearly." The sergeant updated their files. "You're both cleared for advanced certification trials 2 weeks from today. Dismissed." In the corridor after, Marcus clapped Sora on the shoulder hard enough to make her bruised ribs protest. "You two are making the rest of us look bad," he said, but he was grinning. "Also, there's a pool going about whether you'll break the station record for dual certification. Current odds are 7-3 in favor. Don't bet on us," Sora said. "Bet on the training." "That's what matters." But privately, walking back to the bunk bay with Kaivex at her side, she felt something shift. The station's recycled air didn't seem quite as stale. The artificial gravity felt less oppressive. They'd built something rare, a partnership founded on mutual vulnerability and deliberate trust. It wouldn't make the rest of training easy, but it made it survivable. The next 10 days blurred into a rhythm of drills, simulations, and recovery cycles. Sora learned to read Kaivex's micro-expressions even through helmet comms, could predict when he'd need support before he vocalized it. He learned her tells, the slight hitch in breathing that meant pain was escalating toward dangerous, the shift in stance that preceded a tactical pivot. They moved through scenarios like water, filling gaps, adapting to obstacles, succeeding not because either was exceptional alone, but because together they were complete. The night before certification trials, Sora found Kaivex in the observation deck again. Same viewport, same quiet hour. She brought 2 cups of decaf coffee, set one beside him without a word. "Nervous?" she asked after a moment. "Statistically, we should pass." his ridge flickered gray-blue. But statistics don't account for unexpected variables or psychological pressure. So yes, nervous, me too. Sora sipped her coffee, let the warmth ground her. But I'm not nervous about my performance, I'm nervous about letting you down. He turned to look at her, surprise clear. You've never let me down, not once. There's always a first time. No, his voice carried absolute certainty. Because we've trained for this exact fear, we know each other's failure modes, backup protocols, recovery patterns. If you stumble, I'll catch you. If I fall, you'll pull me up. That's not theory anymore, it's proven pattern. Sora felt something tight in her chest loosen. When did you get so wise? When a small human systematically dismantled my worldview and then helped me rebuild it into something functional. His ridge shifted to amber. You saved my career, Sora, probably my life, considering how badly I was spiraling before you offered that reset. So if tomorrow goes perfectly or falls apart, I want you to know I'm grateful for all of it. She didn't have words for what that meant, so she just nodded and stood shoulder to not quite shoulder with him, watching stars wheel past. Tomorrow would bring challenges. But tonight they had this, quiet solidarity and hard-won trust. The certification trial was brutal. It combined every stress test they'd faced: zero-G, limited oxygen, sonic disruptors, adaptive AI, time pressure, and a final twist where they had to extract not just themselves but 3 simulated civilians with incompatible environmental requirements. Sora's oxygen ran out 40 minutes in. Kaivex split his remaining supply and they both operated on half-breath for the final 17 minutes. When the simulation ended and the bay doors opened, Sora's legs gave out. Kaivex caught her, lowered her to the deck, pulled off her helmet. She gasped cold station air, felt her vision swim back into focus. Medical teams swarmed, scanners blinking. The sergeant appeared, data pad in hand. Passing score across all parameters, she announced. Certification granted, both of you. Kaivex's ridge flashed brilliant gold before fading to exhausted gray-blue. We did it, he said like he couldn't quite believe it. We did it, Sora echoed and started laughing, the breathless, relieved kind that bordered on tears. Graduation from basic training came with ceremony but little fanfare. The cohort had shrunk from 24 to 19, 3 washouts, 2 medical discharges. Sora stood in formation wearing her new insignia, Marcus on her left and Kaivex on her right. The station commander gave a speech about unity and sacrifice that blurred into white noise against the hum of Sora's exhaustion and pride. When it ended, they dispersed to pack their belongings and receive deployment orders. Sora's assignment came through first: Forward Operating Station Kepler 62E, Counterinsurgency Operations, 8-month rotation. She stared at the notification, feeling the weight of it settle. Real combat, real stakes. No reset button. Kaivex's assignment arrived 10 minutes later. Same station, same rotation, same unit. He appeared in her bunk bay doorway, data pad in hand, ridge cycling between amber and gold. Coincidence? He asked. The sergeant doesn't believe in coincidence. Sora folded a spare uniform, tucked it into her duffel. She's putting effective teams together. We've got a 97% sync score. We're an asset. And if we're separated in the field, if one of us doesn't come back, then the other one finishes the mission and grieves after. She said it matter of fact, without cruelty. That's what we signed up for. Kaivex stepped inside, let the door close. On Vrexia Prime, battle partnerships like ours have cultural significance. When 2 soldiers learn each other's pain thresholds and fighting rhythms, they often formalize the bond in ceremony. It's called Krechter Bond Through Trial. He hesitated. I don't presume equivalence with human customs, but I thought you should know what we've built is recognized, honored. Sora stopped packing. Are you asking me to participate in your culture's ceremony? No, I'm telling you that what we've done here matters. It's not standard training partnership, it's deeper. And when we deploy, when things get ugly, and they will, I need you to remember that you're not just my teammate, you're my Krechter, my trial bond, the person I trust with my life and my pain. Something in his voice made Sora look up. His ridge was deep blue edged with gold, vulnerability wrapped in pride. She set down the uniform, crossed the small space between them. Then I need you to remember this, she said quietly. Humans break, we're not invincible, we can't endure forever. But we're also stubborn and we're good at compartmentalizing and we'll crawl through hell on broken legs if it means getting our people home. She held his gaze. So when I break, because I will, eventually, don't let me convince you I'm fine. Pull me back, make me reset. Do what I did for you that night in the observation deck. Kivex's expression shifted into something solemn and fierce. I swear it. On my ridge and blood, I swear it. They clasped forearms, human gesture, Vrexian grip strength, mutual understanding. Outside, the station's corridors filled with cadets heading to transport bays, beginning the next phase of their service. But in this narrow room orbiting a red sun 2,000 light-years from both their homes, two soldiers from incompatible biologies made a pact that transcended species. The transport to Kepler-62e took 6 weeks in cryosleep. Sora dreamed of Titan Station, thin air and alarm klaxons, her mother's steady hands teaching her to patch hull breaches with insufficient materials. She woke to the hiss of her pod opening and Kivex's ridge already visible through the adjacent pod's transparent cover, cycling from sleep gray toward waking amber. Forward operating station Kepler-62e was smaller than the training facility, more utilitarian, smelling of ozone and overworked air scrubbers. Their unit briefing covered insurgent activity in the mining colonies, civilian protection protocols, and rules of engagement that felt both too restrictive and too vague. Sora focused on logistics, where the medical bays were, which corridors had secondary oxygen supplies, how long it took to reach escape pods from their assigned barracks. Their first patrol was unremarkable. Routine checks of perimeter sensors, civilian interactions that were more bored than hostile, 6 hours in light armor that left Sora's shoulders aching. Kivex walked slightly ahead, scanning sight lines, his movements efficient and alert. They developed a patrol rhythm during training, one watched high angles, one low, rotating every 15 minutes to prevent sensory fatigue. It was on their 3rd week that things fractured. A civilian transport reported hostile contact 3 clicks from the station. Sora and Kivex's unit deployed in light assault formation, 12 soldiers, mixed species, under the command of a grizzled Thalorian named Commander Shex, whose crystalline skin bore scars from 2 previous deployments. The hostiles weren't insurgents. They were pirates using stolen military tech, hitting transport ships for cargo and occasionally for hostages. The engagement happened fast, weapons fire in the transport bay, smoke grenades obscuring vision, someone screaming in a language Sora's translator couldn't parse. She moved on instinct and training, clearing corners with Kivex at her 6, returning fire only when she had clean shots. A pirate broke from cover, swinging a plasma cutter in a wide arc. Kivex intercepted, took the hit across his shoulder plating. The cutter scored deep and Sora heard him gasp, a sound that bypassed all her training and hit something primal. She dropped the pirate with a nerve strike to the neck, caught Kivex as he staggered. "I'm functional," he said through gritted teeth. His ridge had gone pale, pain spiking through his system. "Continue engagement." "Bullshit." She pulled him into cover, assessed the wound, deep bruising, probable microfracture, nerve inflammation already visible. "You're at 50% capacity and fading. We're falling back to the rally point. The unit will adapt." "That's what units do." She triggered her comm. "Command, this is Miyazaki. 1 wounded, need extract to rally point Delta." Commander Shex's voice crackled back. "Acknowledged. Vess will cover your withdrawal. Move now." They moved. Sora took point, Kivex at her back with his weapon up despite the pain fracturing his focus. The withdrawal was ugly, 2 more hostile contacts, a near miss from a rigged explosive, 30 seconds where Sora thought they wouldn't make it, but they did. The medical team met them at the rally point and Sora stood guard while they stabilized Kivex's shoulder and administered Vrexian-compatible pain suppressors. "You didn't have to pull me out," he said later in the medical bay, his ridge a muted gray-blue. "I've endured worse in training." Training doesn't have real stakes. Sora sat on the adjacent bed, her own hands still shaking with adrenaline come down. "And I made a promise, not just to you, to myself. I won't watch my Crester push past his limits because pride says he should." Kivex was quiet. "Then, you're right, thank you. Don't thank me, just heal fast. We've got patrol in 3 days and Marcus's team is taking bets on whether we'll break the unit's engagement success record." His ridge flickered toward amber. "Then we'd better not disappoint them." The injury sidelined Kivex for 9 days. Sora ran patrols with Marcus, learning different rhythms, but it felt wrong, functional but incomplete. When Kivex returned to active duty, his shoulder still stiff but certified combat ready, the first thing he did was find Sora in the commissary. "I've been thinking about what you said," he began without preamble, "about humans breaking, about compartmentalizing." He set his tray down across from her. "I realized I've been viewing your pain tolerance as infinite, as something I could rely on without reciprocal care. That was incorrect. And dangerous." Sora pushed her food around. "I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm not offering it. I'm offering equal partnership, which means recognizing when you're operating on fumes even if you won't admit it." His ridge deepened to blue. "So I'm asking, how are you, honestly?" She considered lying, considered deflecting. Instead, she said, "Tired. The patrol rotation is brutal and I'm not sleeping well. Dreams about the transport bay engagement, about missing that second pirate and him getting to you." She met his eyes. "I'm functional, but I'm not fine." "Then we adjust." Kyvex pulled up his data pad. "I'll request synchronized downtime. We'll reset together actual rest, not just checking boxes on a recovery protocol. The unit will adapt. You said so yourself." He offered something that was almost a smile. "We're partners, Sora. That means caring for each other's recovery as much as each other's combat effectiveness." They took 72 hours of coordinated downtime. Spent it in the observation bay, in the gym running non-combat drills, in the station's tiny garden module where someone had managed to coax tomatoes from hydroponic tanks. They didn't talk about tactics or threat assessments. They talked about home, Vrexia Prime's bioluminescent forests, Titan Station's ice mining platforms, the small rituals that define their respective childhoods. By the end, Sora felt human again. Not a soldier machine running on adrenaline and duty, but a person with limits and needs and someone who cared enough to enforce boundaries. When they returned to patrol, they moved with renewed synchronization, better than before because it was founded on complete honesty. 3 months into deployment, Commander Shex called them into her office. Her crystalline skin reflected the monitor's blue glow as she pulled up their performance records. "You two have the highest success-to-engagement ratio in the unit," she said bluntly. 0 preventable casualties on your patrols, 3 successful civilian extractions under hostile fire, and consistent adaptation to complications. "That's not luck. It's training and trust," Sora replied. "It's exceptional." Shex leaned back. "I'm recommending you both for advanced tactical certification, multi-species command track. It's another 8 weeks of training after this rotation, but it'll put you on officer track." Sora glanced at Kyvex. His ridge was amber, surprise mixed with cautious pride. "We'd have to extend our deployment by a full cycle," he said slowly. "Yes. But you'd also be building the framework for units like this one, mixed species, high adaptation, focused on partnership rather than hierarchy." Shex's expression softened. "The Galactic Defense Initiative needs leaders who understand that strength isn't uniform. That pain tolerance, combat style, recovery patterns, they're all variable. And that accommodating those variables makes us stronger, not weaker." Sora thought about the training deck 3 months ago, about Kyvex's pale ridge and her own broken ribs, about the choice to reset instead of resent. "I'm in," she said. Kyvex's ridge flashed gold. "As am I. Good." Shex updated their files. "You've got 2 months to finish this rotation without getting killed. Try to make that happen." They did. The final 2 months brought complications, a supply line disruption, increased pirate activity, a diplomatic incident involving a Quiller transport captain with questionable judgment. But Sora and Kyvex navigated it all with the competence born of mutual understanding and practiced trust. When the transport ship finally arrived to rotate them back to the training station, they boarded together, Crester in function and fact. In the cryopod bay just before sedation kicked in, Kyvex turned to Sora. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for breaking every bone in my pride and then teaching me how to rebuild stronger." Sora smiled. "Thank you for letting me and for catching me when I needed it." The pod sealed, the ship jumped to faster than light, and somewhere in the space between stars, 2 soldiers who'd learned each other's pain dreamed of the work ahead.